All right, good. Let's get started. So, this is a nice session. I think you're going to enjoy it quite a bit, but it's also a very interactive session. So, I'm counting on everybody's participation. The first 30 minutes is going to be me teaching a concept that I believe will change your life as a founder. And the last 30 minutes will be me consulting for free, essentially helping you with your business and hoping that you get a maximum amount of value out of this. We have a theme for the day. The day today is about how to break through the noise holding us back as founders. Noise to signal is a core concept we need to understand, and there's much more to it than what we are typically told. So I've built a little presentation for you guys. Should not be too heavy, but I thought the visual support is going to be necessary. Now, before we start, who am I? Well, I'm not a coach or a consultant like you would find at McKinsey that has studied and learned to coach science and art of how to coach people. I'm actually an operator. I've built businesses, multiple businesses across multiple countries, multiple industries. I've been an investor. I've really had my foot on the ground, learning everything I'm teaching you the hard way and building my understanding of how it is that we should be building a business through all of these angles, all of these different industries, from the food and beverage industry to medical supplies, advanced material, defense industry. I've had my experience in a broad spectrum of realities, from direct to consumer sales all the way to government sales. And my claim to fame mostly comes from a strategic pivot that I've done in 2020 that allowed me to scale my business called Neobex from a couple $100,000 of revenue all the way to $70 million in just about 8 months. And I exited from that business, went on to all of these beautiful adventures that I just briefly went over a few seconds ago. And in the process of doing that, I've been through crazy highs and crazy lows. And so I've believe that my entrepreneurial experience, by the sheer intensity of it, allowed me, combined with my interest and my personal mission to teach entrepreneurship, to really discover a unique lens that I think we all grasp partially, but never fully. And I've turned that into a methodology that I believe will solve the root cause of startup failure, which is the fact that the pressure of entrepreneurship comes from places we don't fully understand. It creates noise we don't know how to navigate, and ultimately it disrupts our decision quality under pressure, which is the first domino of startup failure. I firmly believe that when founders break, businesses follow. I've done a TED Talk on that topic at Harvard in February. It's the whole concept of we hold the reins of the success and the failure of our business. All the stats out there point to the majority of business failure having to do with the founder, but I believe they're just scratching the surface, because behind our capacity or failure to identify a product market fit, a pivot, a growth strategy, is the noise clouding our judgment. And so we could pretend that we ran out of resource. Well, why did we run out of resource? Well, it comes down to our decisions. So today we're going to learn about what it is that is creating all that noise, how is it disrupting our decision-making capacity, and why should we actually care, as well as a tool on how to navigate that. And then I'm going to help you with your own noise, like I said. So before we jump into it, though, I want to point out the magnitude of the problem. So just last year, 5.2 million business applications were filed in the US alone. And by the end of this year, only 3.9 on average, based on current statistics, should be still standing. So that's 1.3 million business, 12.5% that will be out of business within the first year. Of course, the stats vary a little bit, but pretty much everyone agrees that by year 10, only a third of business are still standing, because failure is the norm. 80% of the business you see out there are there because a founder failed and tried again. So it's almost a rite of passing if you know how to fail right. But I think we can drastically reduce that number if we learn to navigate what I'm going to teach you today. And it has to do with another survey that was done recently with 400 startup founders that pointed out that 72% of us actually suffer from building a business. It's tough. It's abnormally tough as an experience of being a human, which is why most of us have panic attack, depression, burnout, high stress, anxiety. We experiment up to 5 times more negative emotion than the general population, and yet we are driven to build our business because it is who we are. And every faith has is trial and tribulation. The fate of the founder is characterized by being outside our comfort zone, full of pressure we don't understand. Now, does it have to be that painful? Does it have to lead to failure as a rite of passing? No. We can learn to navigate and see the reality that's happening with more clarity and more grace. And that's the gift I'm trying to give to the world of entrepreneurship. That's the methodology that I've spent the last 2 years building and operationalizing and testing and now launching through my company, Founders Compass. One of the big problems we have is 81% of founders are actually silent about the pressure that they're going through. And so they're stuck in their noise. So what is noise? Well, noise is the external pressure triggering internal reactivity, which leads to reactive decision making. In other words, that we're deciding on things that don't really matter. We're deciding for relief. We're deciding for a sense of growth through action, but it's more motion than momentum. Whereas if we were to remove all of these noise, what would we have left is the signal. So the signal is actually what matters. Steve Jobs was famous for making 3 decisions on signal per day, and that's how he was so successful. I believe all my pivots came from recognizing the signal. I think that's my natural strength. I've done 2 very successful pivots, and pivoting is not made through data. It's made through intuitive attunement and having the tools of strategic thinking to navigate that uncertainty, right? But I think it's achievable by anyone. And I think that even me, as someone that I believe has a natural mode of thinking that helps me find that signal, I was overwhelmed with noise on multiple occasions. And it eventually led to myself breaking at some point. Happy to share more when we go to the Q&A section. But I'm going to share a story of how when founders break, businesses follow, and how the noise play a major role into that later down the road to bring the point home. So just to make it even more clear, what it actually feels when you lead from signal versus noise. I'm going to go rapidly, but when we are in the noise, every decision feels urgent versus seeing decision clearly when we're on signal. When we're in the noise, we see threat, not options, because we're optimizing for survival, versus choosing with clarity and not changing our mind all the time. We tend to push harder when we're in the noise because we think it's going to lead to relief, but we end up further behind because we don't act on things that matter, and we end up changing our mind before we actually prove our hypothesis. It makes our team suffer versus if we stay on signal, our team can breathe. Doesn't mean that they don't have pressure, doesn't mean it makes being an entrepreneur easy, but it makes it easier and tolerable. And so, when we're in the noise, we become reactive, and so sometimes it becomes us being very aggressive, sometimes it becomes us being very dismissive, anxious. We all have our patterns, but for sure our teams walks on eggshell, and that hurts momentum. That's pretty much the difference between noise and signal. And now, why does it matter? Well, there's 2 types of noise. And so if we think about marketing, I'm sure every business out there does marketing. Do we talk to our customers as if they're rational consumers? For sure we don't, because that's not how we make decisions to purchase, right? Purchasing decisions are emotional. So we buy the destination, not the process to get there. We don't buy the feature. We at the very least buy the benefit or what it means to us if we proceed to make that decision to purchase, right? Is it aligned with the type of person we are? There's many things, but it's fundamentally an emotional decision. Why then do we think that we make rational decisions under pressure as leaders? The rational leader doesn't exist just as much as the rational consumer doesn't exist. Every decision happens at the crossroad between the business world, our skills, our demand, what's happening in our business, and our founder world, our personal lives, our values, our patterns, how we're wired, our stress level, right? They both connect with each other and they both contaminate each other. What happens in our business triggers things inside us. What happens inside us triggers things in our business world. And every decision is made at the waterline of it, at the crossroad of it. I use the term waterline because I believe a good image is to think about the founder journey as us sitting on the founder ocean. on our little boat, which is our business, trying to get her to our treasure island, which is our vision. But then the storm of pressure always arrives. So the way to navigate that storm is to have a very, very clear foundation underneath the waterline so that when we reach the decision point at the waterline, it manifests itself the right way, on signal. Let's go a little bit deeper on that concept. So business noise is things like stakeholder demands, changing markets, strategic pivots, opinions, just falling on us like rain every day. That's above the waterline, the business world. Below the waterline is the founder noise. I think there's three primary founder noise that everybody needs to be self-aware of. The first one is the identity noise, the narratives that forge our identity under pressure as founders specifically, right? So we're all in context of many different ways that we should be running our business, from being a hustler to being a strategist to being all sorts of things. Well, when we don't understand the stories from which we lead, they become archetypes, they become tyrannic, and they take over how we approach leading our business. So that becomes noise when it's not aligned with the context that we're in. Second one is cognitive noise. So of course there's biases, but I think most importantly is the cognitive patterns. So we all have a tendency to feel energized by certain modes of thinking and depleted by other modes of thinking. I'm very creative. Finding ideas is energizing to me. It feels safe. Structuring ideas feels daunting. It's terrible. It's like going to the dentist for me. And the cost of it is that I lose my momentum, because often when I'm under pressure, I find safety and comfort in ideas, but I should not come up with more ideas. I should be courageous, decide to structure. But that feels energy intensive. When I'm under pressure, I'm already energy depleted. So now that I know about that pattern, I can be disciplined, and it allows me to get back to momentum. But that we all have a unique comfort zone when it comes to this. And the most important one is the one I paid the most to learn. It's the emotional noise. There's a million emotions, and I'm exaggerating, but there's a ton of emotions. There's three for founders that we need to pay attention to: certainty, fear, and unworthiness. I call this the shadow of entrepreneurship, because the storm of pressure, if you imagine it hiding you from the sun, well, it casts a shadow on you, and that shadow becomes thicker and thicker. It's a crescendo of dark emotion that starts with uncertainty, fear, and then can go all the way to unworthiness. And the emotional noise is the worst one, because it distorts reality and it makes you want to find relief even more. And if we don't see these three emotions happening, then we cannot navigate them. And if we cannot navigate them, we eventually sink deeper into them, unless we're lucky and we find our way out the pressure that we're stuck in. These are the three categories that I think are most important. And the way it costs us is when we are in the noise, we stop seeing opportunities, we see traps. We get, overly cautious. We don't see customers, we sometimes see lifeline. I've been trying to close that enterprise deal for 6 months. I haven't done any lead generation for 6 months. And now what should I do? Should I potentially jeopardize that deal that I've been working so hard and get it out of my focus so that I can start a motion for lead generation? Maybe that deal is my lifeline and I'm going to put everything onto it. And then, the fear builds up, the unworthiness builds in, risk and value get distorted. And all of a sudden, you're just gambling everything you are for that one little chance of success. And we all know that enterprise sales is an evolving beast that has a ton of different decision makers all the time. And, we don't control it as much as we can, but the stories we tell ourselves under pressure affects how we approach it, moving us further away from the rational leader, right? So we stop leading, we start reacting, and our teams start carrying pressure that they don't know how to hold. And so they start reacting in their own shadow emotions, in their own way. And some withdraw, some fight, some quit, and the pressure never disappears. And I'm going to tackle that after that. But at the end of the day, it's a huge limiter. Let me tell you a story. And the story of how I discovered the pressure cascade. So in 2021, I invested in a nanotechnology company called Prometheum, and it was in the advanced material space. It was a technology that could purify the air by using light to break down carbon bonds and pollutants and turning them into water vapor and their smallest constituent, essentially. Crazy technology that existed since the 70s, but ours was 80 times better. And we thought, hey, we've just been through a pandemic. Seems like a pretty good time to invest in indoor air quality. Let's go there. We've used the data to inform us that there was an appetite for VCs to invest, so we could rush to the Series A, only to realize no, that was COVID data. Doesn't really apply to that in reality now, even though we were working with investment bankers and did all the things right. And so for months, our engineers were doing PowerPoints presentations instead of finishing the product and building momentum. We've tried to go to market as an air purifier. Engineering firms were telling us, well, we just need a MERV filter for now. We haven't updated our standards. So can you be as cheap as a MERV filter with your $5,000 HVAC company machine? Well, no, it's a technology. And so we were stuck. And so we were just wasting resources, burning ourselves out, questioning ourselves, getting into unworthiness, getting into fear, watching our money burn away for over a year. Eventually, I pivoted the business and I came back from a business trip with two things. On one hand, if you can see it here, a letter of intent worth hundreds of millions of dollars in a niche market. And then on the other, dozens of leads asking for a sample. And so this should have been the moment, the biggest moment of my career, honestly, the moment that I would scale this company beyond anything I had scaled before. But that's not what happened. My partners, the brains behind our patent, burnt out and quit. And so the lab went dark, the customers moved on, and all the hope disappeared. Why? Not because we didn't have anything we needed from a business sense. I had more contacts, more money, more everything, more skills, and the business was at the finish line. So it should have succeeded. But internally, we had been in the noise for far too long, and our internal noise had taken over. And so my partners, I should have paid more attention to their state, but it was too little too late. And this business just failed. Now, why is that? And I think this is the root cause of startup failure. So I'll show you a little video. You'll see in an infographic. So this is the pressure cascade. This is you. This is your world, your co-founders, everybody around you. You start feeling the pressure because of the noise. You start being reactive. You push through, because that's what we did. We thought we were tough. We thought we could handle the pressure and just push through. But the reality is we do react to it. We become more and more narrow focus in how we push through the pressure. At first is, I'm just going to do more. And then I'm really just going to do that really, really, really well. I'm just going to really focus on my energy there. And all of a sudden we miss all the other signs and signals around us, including how that pressure doesn't stay inside us. Yes, it's become compressed inside us, but it's also spilling to our stakeholders that feel it, from our loved ones to our employees, to our investors, advisors. And now these people start feeling the pressure and react to it in their own way because they're not as used to push through like that. Our founders were very hungry. We can push through for months and years. Doesn't mean it makes us well mentally, but these stakeholders now react to their own way. They burn out there, they withdraw. And now here's the trick. The pressure doesn't disappear again, but now with 10x back to the founder. All that noise we were suppressing, all that pressure we were trying to push through that was incrementally building inside us, now exponentially builds. Because our stakeholders represent more to us than the work they do. They are also our conceptual stability. My technical partners, when they left, they took away their day-to-day work with them, but they also took the innovation pipeline we were thinking about releasing afterwards. They took the credibility they would bring to our stakeholders. They took the safety of the relationship where we were many sharing that burden, right? Many layers of conceptual safety that every one of our stakeholders represent, from our spouse to our investors, right? And so now it makes it very hard to not see our own breaking point because it's an exponential, like I said. So this is how founders end up breaking and becoming a statistic. When the noise becomes too much, they don't know how to treat it because they don't understand the layers of noise. Then they push through. People around them start feeling it. They react, they break, and now it comes back to them, and now they break. And this is why most founders fail, most business fail. That's the fundamental truth. Now, what can we do about that? I have a protocol that I want to offer to you, which is the 3C protocol. So calm. So when you catch yourself becoming reactive, if you understand what you do when you're reactive, if you have that self-awareness of the way you react to the emotional, cognitive, and identity noise, then you can catch yourself. And you can give yourself permission to let the world burn with all of its noise for a while, until you can get back some level of clarity. It's not about procrastination. It's also not about being avoidant. It's about strategic stillness. It's acknowledging that you're not a rational leader. I should come up with a better word, but you're not a rational consumer. You're a human, and humans make emotional decisions that we don't often realize are emotional because we justify them with logic. So that brings you to the second step, is to clarify. Can you name the noise? Can you name the signal? Can you challenge the story the noise tells you, and find that signal underneath? And then commit to that signal. Decide, only act, or only seek to prove what is not a noise response, but is actually a signal. It's simple, but it requires a lot of self-awareness. It's something that will, when I go to fireside chat with founders that I've been in the business for 35 years, and they say, had I only known that, I would not have wasted 15 years of my life. So we get to that peak at some point, that peak of the mountain. We don't always see the full picture. Like, I've taken the time to map it out for 2 years because that was a personal mission for me. But we all get a glimpse of the same truth at some point. The question is, how much are you willing to pay for that? So starting today, pay attention to noise, try to differentiate from signal, look within you to see what it triggers. Do you always end up at the same place, dealing with the same kinds of problems? Well, that's a pattern that's probably being triggered by the pressure you're in. Save yourself some years and think about that. And if you want, we have a program that can teach that to you, of course. And these are some of the testimonials that we have, that essentially it applies to every founder at every business stage going through something hard. But today I want to give you some value on top of the teaching. So I hope I'm leaning on my team here to help me see people. And I don't know if we can bring you guys on stage with me, but I would love to see what noise is pressuring you right now. What are you struggling with from a business side, from a founder side, above or below the waterline? What do you question? What are the decisions that you're currently thinking through at the moment? I'd love to help walk you through my lens on that if you're interested. So I got public chat here. There's always a learning curve with anything. See, Shani say, I like the 3C protocol. I see Nick Austin saying hello. Hello, Nick. Any questions, Nick? Anything you want to brainstorm with me? That's your moment. Am I back now? Yeah, I'm back. Okay. Oh, God. All right. So what I was saying is, if you don't have any questions for me now, you can always scan the QR code and we can have an appointment with me or my team. And we have, of course, that program that helps you build that protocol and all of that. But I also saw in the meantime that Nikki had a question saying, what does conceptual safety really mean and how can we do this? So conceptual safety, what I mean by that is, for me, thinking conceptually is my comfort zone. So for you, it might be a structural current of thought that gives you a sense of comfort. There's 4 quadrants, right? There's analytical thinking, which tends to rely on data and logic. Structural thinking, that tends to want to find safety in processes. Conceptual, which is ideas. And then you have relational, which is people. And so every quadrant is needed. You need to have that cognitive diversity in your team, because if it drains you to start thinking in terms of people, partnership, employees, all of that, then you need someone that doesn't feel that level of burden because it's their natural way to operate in this world, right? So when I build my team, I know that my weakest is structural, so I always look for an integrator to help me. Otherwise, I get stuck in motion and I lose on momentum. So that's very, very crucial for me. I have a good logic. I have a strong relational and conceptual quadrant. So sometimes I can do a bunch of things with the logic, analytical brain, but ultimately it still requires that real process-driven, structured brain. And learning to communicate between how different people think, especially if it's the opposite quadrant of yours, is a challenge. But the courage is to know which quadrant requires your approach depending on context. So now I know there's another question. I hope that answers. I'm struggling with what I want to do with my life. I'm 56. I own a remodeling business for 20 years in New York City. I own a deli for 4 years. I bought some rental properties. Decided to move to Florida to get away from construction, but having a hard time finding my footing. I'm also in recovery for 32 and a half years. And I've been thinking about becoming a life coach, recovery coach. Not sure. Okay, so you've done a lot. That's amazing. When I was in the deepest layers of the shadow, I eventually got a phone call from one of my former partners. And when I made my exit from the company I told you guys about, it was a two-part exit. So a couple money up front, and then most when we sold the inventory. So I thought maybe this is the good news call. My former partner is calling me to let me know that the inventory sold and I'm about to collect the lion's share of my exit. But that's not what happened. Phil, I've got bad news. The warehouse burned, stock is gone, and it had not been insured. That tipped me over the edge. And in that pain, I found something more precious. Permission to let the world burn for a while. Because I was always firefighting, always obsessing over what to do next, or obsessing over doing more to prove myself, doing more to escape the feeling of fear of failure and uncertainty. But I could not anymore. And so I was able to give myself permission to let the world burn, and all the story it told about what growth should look like for me. And in that silence, I heard for the first time my intuition whisper. Signal, in other words. On that day, the signal was to take my kids and just be a father. Not trying to become the best father, but just be a father. And I took my 3 kids on a trip, became an anchor for me, safety outside my venture. And from there, I rebuilt and I went on my journey that eventually led me to that perspective that I'm sharing with you guys. It seems like you've been through a lot yourself, and it seems like you might be obsessing over what's next for you. But what's next for you probably requires giving yourself permission to let all the noise burn for a while. And when I did that, the way it felt is I gave myself permission to be aimlessly courageous. So it doesn't mean I wasn't doing anything. It meant that I was trying to hear that little whisper over and over and become more attuned. And so I became, at some point, an advisor for go-to-market in the Trail Venture Studio in AI. I've done some AI consulting. I've done some private equity consulting. Just because I felt like there's something there for me that I was curious about without having figured out anything, precisely. I was just aimlessly courageously taking step towards what felt like a signal. It wasn't that, pivoting. And eventually you can see, all right, I got my TED Talk now approved at Harvard. Let me quit that private equity fund and focus on that. And so that was my signal. So in your case, if you feel like there's something around coaching, what can you take as a step towards finding more clarity and discovering if that's actually a signal or noise? If that's just you trying to find meaning, or if it's you that will actualize actually and transform in that process. Because we all have pains, and therefore we all have wisdom to share that can help others. So I hope that helps. That's how I've gone through that myself. Anybody else I can help, that would be great. What resonated with you guys more around the things I said? QR code is not readable. Okay, what can I do? Is it readable like that? What, is it good now? Is it because my face is here? No, that's worse. What about that? No. What would you guys want me to talk about on the next live? I've done 4 at this point. I'd like them to build on each other so that they're actually helpful. This one was a test on Riverside to see if we could promote it to more platforms than just LinkedIn. I want to broaden the reach of the message. So if you have any suggestions, any feedback on things that resonated, things that were not as great for you, or anything that would help us make these lives more helpful, that's always appreciated. Also curious what brought you here. Like if anyone wants to share why you decided to spend a bit of your time with us, that would be great. All right, I think most people left at this point. So reach out, scan the QR code, get a meeting with us if you want to improve as a leader and learn to find that signal and understand yourself better. I appreciate you all. Thank you for your time and see you soon.